So we are recording now. Um, so just a quick introduction. You guys know me. I'm Lou Blaustein, CEO of Eco Athletes, and we are just honored and blessed to have Dr. Katharine Hayhoe, um, climate scientist of Texas at Texas Tech University. Um, I think environmental scientist at the Nature Conservancy,
Just
climate
just chief scientist.
chief scientist.
Whole kit and caboodle.
Yeah, and also the greatest climate communicator I've heard, the author of the must-read newsletter Talking Climate, which I actually had a chance to guest edit one time, which was fantastic. And I could say more, but I'm going to now hand the floor over to our friend, a friend of an Eco Athletes Hall of Famer, mind you, Dr. Katharine Hayhoe. The floor is yours.
Great to meet you all. I am in Dallas, Texas. I am from Toronto, Canada. Um, my first memory is of going to one of my dad's hockey games, because of course in Canada everybody plays hockey. And I remember the goalie's mask was so scary. I started screaming and I had to be carried out of the game. I was like 2 years old, I think. I am not a professional athlete. If I had chosen a sport, when I was in my teens, I was really into water skiing. Like I'm talking like every day, hours every day. So I probably would have picked that. But these days, my favorite sport is my e-foil board. You know those boards where it actually has a battery on it and a foil, and I just absolutely love that because no green guilt whatsoever, and it's super fun too. And you're not being dragged by a boat. Um, so I'm a climate scientist, and I study climate change. I teach at the university. I work with the Nature Conservancy, which is the largest conservation organization in the world, working in 80 different countries on climate, biodiversity, and more. Um, and I can answer any questions you have about climate change. I let me tell you a story though, because these days, I have to say, I feel like this past year has just been so tough, especially if you live in the US or you just read any news related to the US. You don't even have to live in the US for it to be a tough year. Um, because there's an administration that is basically walking everything back on science, on climate, on pollution, on health, on anything that we know will help us build a better future. And sometimes it seems like everything is just sort of rolling back downhill. But even on climate, it isn't. So in September, I was in New York for New York Climate Week, which probably a few of you know. Yep, Lou definitely knows that you're there. And one of the events I was asked to do is I was asked, along with Johan Rockström, who's another climate scientist from the EU, Johan and I were asked to open the United Nations session where all the countries of the world were going to present their what they call NDCs, which are nationally determined contributions to the Paris Agreement. So it was at the UN, and Johan and I gave a short talk before talking about how urgent it was that we do as much as we can, as quickly as we can. And then it was literally like a potluck dinner because there was all these countries in the room. The US desk was empty. But all the other countries were there, and they were all going to bring sort of what they were going to contribute. So we spoke our piece and we sat down, and then it was up to whatever country who wanted to come up. Guess who the first country up was? China. He had even pre-recorded a video because President Xi couldn't be there in person. And basically, so he talked all about how for the China is installing more solar every year than the US has in its entire history, year on year. They are actually their emissions have peaked and they're going to be reducing their emissions for the first time in history, which the China is way behind the US. The US is still responsible for um, more than 25% of global emissions cumulatively. China's responsible for about 12 or 13%, but they're going to peak their emissions before the US did in its history. And the subtext was, thank you, the United States, for handing us the leadership of the clean energy future. That was the subtext. And then right after them, The next one up was the EU. And the EU was basically like, not so fast. We're actually taking action even more than you. And they were talking about everything they're doing and all the leadership they're providing and how they're engaging with a lot of developing countries to help them sort of leapfrog over fossil fuels and go with clean energy instead. And then the next step after them was Turkey, who was saying, give us the next COP meeting because look at all the amazing things we're doing. And then right after them was Australia, who's like, no, 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 look at everything that we're doing. And in my newsletter back in August, I actually had a really cool edition on Australia where the good news was a coal town that realized that coal is not the future. So it's re-envisioning itself as what would it look like in a sustainable future. So one by one, all of these countries went up and literally they were lined up to talk about what they're doing. And that's just countries. When you look at what cities are doing, what organizations are doing, what all kinds of different entities around the world are doing, the clean energy future is unstoppable. It can be slowed down. Individual countries can definitely fall behind, but you can't stop it. And eventually, if you try to stop it, you're just going to get rolled over. So that gave me a lot of encouragement, especially in this year, to know that, as they often say, it's darkest before the dawn. I feel like it really is darkest right now. It is very, very, very dark right now. But part of the reason, in fact, actually, maybe could be all of the reason why it's so dark, is because the fossil fuel industry and those whose power and wealth has been built on the structures enabled by the fossil fuel industry, perhaps even more those than the industry itself, they realize that their days are numbered and they are fighting against the change with everything they have. So that's where we are today. So that was a little more sort of brutally honest than I usually am, but that's sort of the way I'm seeing things right now. It really, I mean, it almost reminds me of like Tolkien or the Blitz in London during World War II, or sort of these meta struggles between dark and light. And that's really where we are. And the progress is not going to be consistent. It's always, it feels like 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, not 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but a larger ratio of backward steps. But the direction is always moving forward. And I love that quote, the passage you just shared. What if it's not the darkness of the tomb, but the darkness of the womb? Yeah, that's really, really cool. All right. So I'm just here to answer your questions or any thoughts that you've been having, anything you want to know about the big climate conference that just wrapped up, COP in Belém, any of the extreme weather events we've been having lately. Terrible flooding in Sri Lanka is the latest. I mean, literally all around the world, every week there's a new disaster. The US hit a brand new record this year of $1 billion plus weather or climate disaster every week, the first half of this year. Just for reference, back in the 1980s, there was one every 4 months. So that's how quickly things are changing. And in terms of how that affects sports, as you know, more and more research is showing how climate change is affecting summer athletes through increasing the conditions that cause heat stress in the human body. We know that it's massively affecting winter athletes, where some places are getting like huge amounts of snow. Like Lake Louise is just inundated with snow. And then you go to poor Utah and it's like just dry grass on the slopes. So the variability of these conditions is changing to where it's a lot harder to predict what type of conditions you're going to get. And if you are an outdoor athlete, that means that you're going to have to be prepared for a much broader range of conditions. And in some places, I mean, in Dallas was one of the first to do this. They're putting roofs on stadiums just because they know that the conditions are much more variable than they used to be. So climate change is no longer a distant issue. It's affecting us right here, right now. And really, honestly, a lot of you are on the front lines of that because you're spending time in conditions and because your discipline requires conditions that are no longer as predictable and as stable as they used to be.
And so, Catherine, thank you for that kind of state of the union, of the climate union. And for if you do read Catherine's
Oh,
uh,
yeah.
uh, Talking Climate newsletter, there's always something good, but then what's not so good. And so Catherine is a truth teller in this space that always has mis and disinformation.
Mhm.
And I actually want to take a point of personal privilege, Catherine, to kick off the questioning.
Sure.
And then everybody else, just raise your hand either literally or use that hand raising icon. And then we will get you mic'd up, so to say, to ask your question. So I was thinking about it. I now know, I don't know you this long, but I know of you going back to An Inconvenient Truth. That was the first time I heard of you, which is now
Really?
18 years ago, if you can believe
Was
that.
I don't think, was I mentioned in that movie?
Yeah,
I was?
yes,
I remember going to see that movie with my family, but I
yes.
don't even remember being mentioned in it. That's so
Well,
funny.
so how about that?
Okay.
And then I remember shortly after that, or a few years after that, uh, I became a climate reality leader in
Mhm.
Al Gore's climate reality project, where he trains
Time.
thousands of people to be climate reality leaders and basically to give the slideshow that is at the heart of An Inconvenient Truth and An Inconvenient Sequel.
Mhm.
And you were on video featured in this at the training. And at that point, you were in Lubbock at Texas Tech University, and you were talking about how you were in the most conservative district or one of the most conservative uh, congressional districts or zip codes in the country, and that's who your audience was.
Mhm.
And so my question is, now that, that's a dozen or 13 years ago, that training that I got, what have you noticed, if any, in terms of changes in attitude on the ground in that part of Texas and Texas more
No,
broadly?
you didn't need them.
Uh,
Okay,
and
sure.
anyway, uh, so that's my question.
Okay. Dotsie, you are not muted, just FYI.
Now she is.
Okay. Um, yes. So I am in Dallas now, but for many years I lived in Lubbock, which is the second most conservative city in the US, the first being Provo, Utah, where I have spoken to at BYU. In fact, BYU has a great climate program. Um, and when I first started talking about climate change, the reason I started is because I got invitations from local groups like local book clubs and women's clubs and the Senior Citizens Home to start talking about it. So that's how I got started. And when I did, people were curious about, is it real and is it human caused? So most people were not aware whether it was real or it was human caused. And 15 years ago, um, if you lived in Alaska, you would definitely see that climate was changing. If you lived somewhere really close in a low-lying area close to the ocean, you would probably notice sea level rise or increased sunny day flooding. But 15 years ago, most people really hadn't noticed how it impacted their personal life. But interestingly, Lubbock, Texas is also the home to some of the wildest and weirdest weather in the US. In fact, when the Weather Channel had a extreme weather competition, the finalists were Fairbanks, Alaska, Caribou, Maine, Fargo, North Dakota, and Lubbock, Texas, and Lubbock won. So, one of the biggest ways that climate change is affecting us is by taking the weather dice and loading them against us. So, wherever we live, it's like we have this pair of weather dice, and we always have a chance of rolling double sixes. We always have a chance of a storm, a flood, a heat wave, or a drought, or something like that. That's normal. But what's happening as the planet warms decade by decade is it's taking one or more of these numbers on our dice and turning it into another six, and then another six, and then even a seven. And then pretty soon you're rolling double sixes much more frequently than you should. And you're even rolling a double seven. You're like, how did this get on the dice? Well, in Lubbock, Texas, they already had a couple of sixes on their dice because they already had such extreme weather naturally. And they started seeing more and more and more. So within 5 or 6 years, there had been the driest period on record, multiple wettest periods on record, multiple, most 100 days in a row, 100-degree days in a row. And so people started, I remember as early as 2011, people started in Lubbock started to be like, hey, what's that? Or what's this? And so I started to get questions about, is the weather getting weirder? Because we've lived here all our lives and we're used to weird weather, but this is something new. So I saw that transition from what is this that people are talking about with the polar bears to there's something weird going on. Can you tell me what it is? To nowadays, everybody has a story. If I ask people, is the weather getting weirder? Everybody has stories to tell me about how the weather is getting weirder. Everybody knows that something's happening. And in fact, across the United States and around the world, the majority of people are worried about climate change, even in Texas. They're worried about it. And that's what I think of as the head. And for a long time, we thought the head was enough. We were sort of back with like the ancient philosophers like Plato. Plato had this whole theory about the rational man, how people can just make completely rational decisions. Well, guess what? We don't make entirely rational decisions. And so people thought for a long time, like Plato, oh, if we just are worried, then everybody will do the right thing. No, we're missing two even more important ingredients. Beyond the head, which is being worried about what's happening, we need the heart. How is it affecting me? My life, my health, my food, my budget, my insurance, my kids, my family, my pets, my sport. How is it affecting me? I think of that as the head to heart gap. And when you ask people in the US, are you worried about climate change? Most people say yes. And then actually, you know what? Can I share my screen? I can even show you the data because this is pretty crazy.
Hold on, let me just give you that
Okay.
capability. You
All
should be
right.
able to do that now.
Okay, perfect. So let me actually show you the data because you'll see what I'm talking about. The Yale Program on Climate Change Communication has surveyed people for almost 15 years now, asking them questions. And I'm going to show you the map about are we worried? Let's see. Worried. Okay. So here is the map that asks people, are you worried? And you can see, even across Texas, more than half of Texas is worried. Anywhere that's yellow or orange is more than 50% of people. But then when they asked people, do you think it will affect you? That's the head to heart gap. You can see there's a lot of questions here. I'll put this link in the chat because you can explore your congressional district or your county. Do you think it will harm me personally? Look at that. And then while I'm here, I'll just show you one more question. Do you ever talk about it once in a while?
Hmm.
See that? So I'll put this in the chat because it's really fun to explore. But that's the head to heart gap. So we haven't done a good job of helping people understand how their kids' soccer practice is being moved because it's too hot, or their kids' asthma or their own asthma has gotten worse because of pollution from wildfire smoke. But even the heart isn't enough because the whole world could be worried. The whole world could understand exactly how it affects them. But if we don't know what to do, we'll do nothing. And so when the folks at Yale did this research, I said, you know what? It's good to know how many people are worried. But what I really want to know is how many people are activated. That's the hands. How many people are actually, they know what to do and they're doing something. So they went ahead and they surveyed people. And at this point, 66% of people in the US are worried about climate change. What percent do you think have made it all the way down to the hands? What percent know what to do and are doing at least one of those things?
5.
Very close. 8. So you could have 100% worried. You could even have 100% understanding why it matters to them. But if people don't know what to do, they'll do nothing. So that's why, in my opinion, the hands are so important. So nowadays, when you go to any of my social media accounts where you can pin anything to the top, which isn't everyone, but like Instagram, for example, I'll put this in here so you can see what I'm talking about. There we go. If you go to any of my social media accounts where you can pin something, what I have pinned is a science-based list of the most effective things people can do. Because 10 years ago, the most frequent question I got was, what gives you hope? And I still get that question today. And in exchange now today, I say, what are you doing to create hope? Because we find hope in action. But now the most common question I get is not what gives you hope. The most common question I get is, what can I do? So I feel like the head is mostly there. The heart connections are being made. And as soon as people make the head to heart connections, they immediately want to know, what can I do? Like if it's my family, my sport, my home being affected, then I want to do something about it. So the number one question I get now is, what can I do? And as you will see from my post there, the number one thing you can do has nothing to do with your personal carbon footprint. Now, this is a radical thought because everybody's like, oh, I know what I can do. Most people think they can recycle. And don't get me wrong, that's a good thing to do, but it won't fix climate change. Then people are like, oh, I drive an EV, or I don't drive at all, or I have solar panels, or I'm a vegan. And all of those things are great ways to reduce your personal footprint. But if all of us who have the not just financial resources, because these options are more expensive generally, but although that's changing, but not fast enough, but the knowledge, the resources to actually find what do these foods look like? Will they give me the protein I need? How do I find solar panels and where do I get the loan to do it? Finding this information takes a lot. Even if everybody who had the resources and the time to do all that did it, that would maybe fix about 20% of the problem. So, what do we have to do? We have to make the right choices for how we get our energy, how we travel, how we heat and cool our homes, how we manufacture and dispose of our goods, and how we eat. We have to make all of those choices. We have to make the best choice, the easiest and most affordable choice. We have to make the best choice, the big red easy button. So, if somebody has to go downtown, the easiest way is public transportation. It's going to be fast, it's going to be cheap. If you have to drive, the easiest place to find a place to charge your car is to plug it in. You have to go way out of your way to find a gas station. It's very inconvenient. You know what I mean? So we have to, when you go to the grocery store, the fresh fruits and veggies and all of the plant-based options need to be right there, available, cheaper, more affordable. You have to go way back to find the big steaks, and they cost a lot of money. So that's what we have to change. And to change that, we need our voices. We need to change the system. And so that's why, if you look at my list, we do have reduce your personal footprint and make it contagious by talking about it at the bottom. But we have a lot of things about how our voices can change the system so that the easiest choice for everyone, the most affordable choice for everyone, will also be the best choice for our future. So thank you, Lou. Long answer to a short question.
That was great. That was great. We have a question that was written in by Laura Hall, who I think had to. Laura, why don't you unmute yourself if you
Sure.
can, Laura, and then you can ask the question. Uh, maybe not. All right. She might not be there. So her question was in the oh no, Laura, you're unmuted. Why don't you ask your question and introduce yourself first?
Hi, Catherine. I'm Laura Hall. I'm a para equestrian and I'm also Canadian, but I'm on the other coast, the West
Ah,
Coast. I won't say the best coast, but
well, I'm not from the coast at all, so that's fine.
um, I was just curious about the countries that you had mentioned. What were they actually saying that they were going to do, and how they were going to go about doing those things to make a difference?
Yes. So that's a great question because to continue the potluck analogy, everybody brings a different dish to the table. So, for example, Norway has really leaned into electric vehicles and they have transitioned almost their entire vehicle fleet to electric vehicles. Um, there's 7 countries already, including Scotland, that are almost 100% renewable electricity. There's other countries where, for example, New Zealand, the biggest part of their emissions come from their agricultural sector, not their energy sector. So they have to look at a lot of solutions related to how they cultivate sheep and what you feed cows to reduce the methane that they produce that are such a powerful heat trapping gas. There's other countries where preserving, protecting, and regrowing their forests are the biggest thing they can do. They might be a low income country where they don't have a lot of energy related emissions, but they have huge forest areas, and protecting the carbon stores in their forests is the most effective thing that they can do. Um, in Canada, one of our most exciting initiatives right now is called CANZA. It's the Canadian Alliance for Net Zero Agriculture. And the catalyst for that was when the Nature Conservancy in Canada, which, weird fact, the Nature Conservancy is in 80 countries. It's called the Nature Conservancy in 79 countries. In Canada, it's called Nature United. because there's already a Nature Conservancy of Canada, which is different. Anyways, so in Canada, Nature United did a study showing that the biggest potential for nature-based solutions to reduce carbon emissions in Canada was not in forestry, but rather in agriculture. That's where we have the greatest potential to reduce our emissions. So the Kansas Initiative is really interesting. It is a combination of the Royal Bank, which does the most loans to farmers, the major grocery food producers and grocery stores that actually sell the food. Then some farmers who are already doing regenerative agriculture practices who can explain to their neighbors how it actually works. um, and then obviously researchers too, who are exploring the latest techniques in sustainable agriculture and monitoring. Because if a farmer does something, they have to get a credit for it, which means they have to be monitored and validated, which is a big issue too. So there's a lot of people in engineering and technology. So Kansas is a really interesting example of how and yes, they have government, they have the Minister of Agriculture connected to this and the Minister of Natural Resources, the Minister of Science and Innovation. But it's a really interesting example of how change can happen, bringing all different actors in, starting with a study that said agriculture is where we need to focus. In Texas has leaned way into clean energy, not because it addresses climate change, but because it makes money, which is fine. Texas is now 38% on average, which means some days we're up to 60%. On average, 38% powered by wind and solar energy. And we have 5 different types of storage on the grid: battery storage, pumped storage underground, gravity storage, where when wind is very cheap at night, they just raise these giant blocks with the cheap wind energy and then they drop them slowly to produce energy when it's more expensive. We even have 2 distributed power plants on the grid where they've got together a couple of thousand people with batteries and solar panels, and they've turned them into a power plant where people can actually sell the energy they produce on their roof to the grid. So each country and each city and each state is taking a different approach, sort of like a toolkit. And there's no one right way. It just depends on where you are, where you want to go, what resources you have available. It's literally like what ingredients you have in the fridge and the cupboard to work with, as well as what particular type of food you like. So that's what I love is when it comes to climate change, there's no silver bullet, but there's so much silver buckshot that when we put it all together, we have more than enough. And so in my newsletter, Talking Climate, every week I share good news, and a lot of that good news has to do with what different cities, states, countries, organizations, businesses, tribal nations, nonprofits, people are doing to make a difference. I've been doing it for 3 years and I've never repeated the story. So that's how much there is. All right, Mackenzie, you've had your hand up for a long time.
Hi, yeah, thank you so much for being here. I also live in Texas. I live in the Rio Grande Valley.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
and yeah, former college beach volleyball player, and I run an organization to eliminate toxic pesticides and fertilizers from college campuses. Um, and my question was, yeah, I'd love to just hear more about your like reflections from COP30. I've read a bit of things, but yeah, and just like I guess your overall just like take on that and how people should be like engaging in that space, or yeah, just would love to hear kind of like your takeaways.
Absolutely. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put my direct links to my 2 newsletters that specifically talk about COP. Just a second here. Okay, there we go. So, um, click on those or bookmark them for later. So, in a nutshell, this was what is COP? COP is the Conference of Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is a mouthful. The Framework Convention on Climate Change was signed in 1992. And in it, all the countries in the world agreed to prevent dangerous human interference with the climate system. And then they proceeded to spend, let me do the math here, 23 years arguing over what that looked like. And I actually did research specifically on what is dangerous and what temperature thresholds are dangerous. So I did some of the research that led to the Paris Agreement in 2015, where countries agreed to prevent warming from exceeding 2 degrees Celsius, 1.5 if they could. Well, here we are, we're at 1.3. So In 2015, the Paris Agreement was signed, and since then, most of the COP meetings are for the different country delegates to argue over how they're going to meet the targets. And so they typically come away from a COP with an agreement, or they come away with not an agreement because they need consensus, which is ridiculous expecting consensus from all the countries in the world. But what happened was back in 1992, they never agreed on a decision-making framework. And so the default is consensus, which just, I mean, I have a forehead-shaped dent in my desk sometimes because of this stuff. I mean, how would you expect all the countries in the world to agree on something? So as a result, the COP agreements have always been the lowest common denominator because they have to be something that Saudi Arabia will agree to and Russia will agree to. And so you can imagine the Paris Agreement was like a miracle to happen. So are the COPs necessary? I think they are because it's important for countries to come together, look each other in the face. There's something about looking at somebody else's eyes and actually talk about what you are or aren't doing. Do the COPs need to be this giant circus of a trade show with tens of thousands of people, such that the second largest delegation after Brazil is the fossil fuel industry? No, I don't think they do. I think the COPs need to continue, always yielding a little bit more than we had before, but never enough. That's sort of their motto. More than we had, but never enough. But I also think we really need to be leaning in to more regional gatherings like New York Climate Week, where people get together to really talk about solutions and implementation of solutions below the federal level. And this is sort of happening organically. Like, we actually have I think this year is our first Climate Week in Toronto. Obviously, New York Climate Week is popular. London has a Climate Week. I think Melbourne might have a Climate Week. Now, there's different cities, Climate Weeks are popping up. And I feel like that's where we need to go because we really need to get like our fingers into the dirt. Like, what are you doing? What am I doing? How can we work together to do even more? That's where we're at. The COP is only going to take us so far. It's necessary, but is in no way sufficient. And as an example, this year, they couldn't even get the phrase phase out fossil fuels into the final agreement.
Which they had before, or something like it
Well, they just even mentioned
mentioned.
fossil fuels just a couple of
Right,
years ago for the first
right.
time. And fossil fuels are responsible for almost 75% of the emissions that are causing climate change. Agriculture and land use change and deforestation are the other 25%. But fossil fuel, like if you don't phase out fossil fuels, you can't fix climate change. So it's kind of a no-brainer. So that's how limited COP is. But at the same time, it's important because getting all the countries together where they actually have to look at each other and tell each other they're not going to do this, like it is a very personal interaction when you have somebody yelling in the face of one of the other countries that their entire country is going to be gone if they don't do this. If that it, the needle has been moved further because of those opportunities than it would have without.
Awesome. We have
Right.
Catherine, I want to be respectful of your time. So we have 8 minutes left with Catherine, and we have Tina, Sarah, and Sydney with their hands raised.
Yes.
So Tina, you're up.
And I will be quick. Go for it.
Okay. I'm actually just coming back from a run. So so
Wait a
mine
minute,
is
wait a
very
minute. I have to say this. She just came back from her first freaking ultra marathon, okay?
well, actually it relates to my question. So yes, I just ran my first 100K in Cape Town, which also had their marathon cancelled a few months ago due to weather. Um, and the not finish rate for this race was 48%. So very visible. It was heat related. A lot of people didn't finish. Now I work at the intersection of sustainability and the running industry, working with a lot of the major marathons. And in the example of that, like not finish race or a rate or races being cancelled, a lot of the running is booming right now. So the race directors are kind of like, we'll deal with that later. Sustainability, we just want to like get our races as big as they can, and they're getting the runners to sign up. The runners, even in the case of Cape Town, when it gets cancelled, are saying, okay, but that's on the races to figure out. So there's kind of, I think this relates to many things in that like finger pointing. The race directors are saying, I'll get to it when the runners care about it. They just want to get in the race. The runners are saying, well, that's the race's responsibility to do this. I don't need to ask, or they don't see the correlation of their role and their voice. So any advice for kind of getting people to kind of take that accountability and stop pointing fingers at other people?
Oh my gosh, Tina. Well, first of all, I cannot believe it. Like How many minutes ago did you finish the race?
Well, couldn't tell, I'm not good at math, but yeah, it wasn't long ago.
Okay. It is very impressive. I would be on my face dying at this point.
I was at the finish.
Um, this is the classic thing. I see this all the time. Unfortunately, when we don't know what to do, finger pointing is one of our first responses.
Mhm.
And I see this all the time. I see it with companies all the time. I talk to the CEO and they're like, oh, but the board of directors won't let me. I talk to the board of directors and they're like, oh, the shareholders won't let us. I talk to the shareholders and they're like, oh, the CEO won't respond. And round it goes. And somebody has to break the stalemate. And breaking the stalemate requires not just the heart, but the hands too. So to break the stalemate, first of all, the people who can make a decision, well, actually, I would work backwards. What could be done? You have to figure out what a first step could be, and then figure out who would do the first step, and then get the other people to support them doing the first step. So rather than saying you have to do something, and they're like, well, I don't know what to do, they have to do something. Well, I don't know what to do, they have to do something. I think what would break the circle is figuring out what to do.
Mm,
And it doesn't have to be a 100% solution. It just has to be the first step. And there's got to be other organizations. In fact, I know there's other organizations who are doing stuff like this. Like the athletes on the World Cup skiing asked if they could have all the races in one continent together and then all the races in the other continent together so they wouldn't have to fly back and forth every week, which is very exhausting, increases your risks of getting sick, and massively increases your carbon footprint too. So even something as simple as grouping races geographically or whatever it is, just the first step, it could even be a symbolic or almost nearly symbolic step. But I think that's what you have to do first is
yeah,
figure out what. Mhm.
yeah. Working on it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Sarah, and congrats, Tina, and I hope
Thank
you're
you.
giving yourself a good rest.
I
Mhm.
At
am.
some...
I am.
All right, Sarah, you're up from the UK.
Thank you. Hi, Katharine. Really nice to meet you again. I truly find you so inspirational to listen to. I wish I could have you on my shoulder every day. Um, yeah, my name's Sarah. I'm an English Channel swimmer and coach. I live in Dover. One of the big problems in our area is sewage, and a lot of people approach me about the state of our oceans, particularly sewage around where we live. And I really struggle sometimes with the answers because I always say to people, well, you use your washing machine too much, your dishwasher, you want to have a shower 3 times a day. And then when there's heavy rainfall, you still want to do all those things and the system can't cope. But everyone says, yeah, but the government should do more to fix the sewage system. So, again, it's like this finger pointing scenario. But actually, my question really is about population because in the United Kingdom, especially, population keeps growing. We're quite a small country. And even I now live in a brand new house, which I'm like, oh, because we keep building houses. And recently, the British government, we had a budget recently, and they got rid of the 2-child benefits cap, which I don't know if they introduced that to reduce their spend or whether they introduced that because of to encourage people not to have more children. But my question is, are you seeing globally a shift in countries, how they are they actually actively trying to reduce population by examples like I've given? I mean, sadly, our government's just relinquished that benefit cap on the 2 children cap. But are you seeing any changes to reduce population growth?
Yes and no. So first of all, obviously China is the biggest example of that.
Mm,
But the biggest population growth right now is happening in low-income countries where women do not have access to basic health care.
mm,
They have no access to family planning, or if they do, they live in a patriarchal society where it's up to their husband and their male relatives to actually prevent them from having them.
mm,
Also, infant mortality is off the charts. I mean, if you're going to lose half your children before the age of 5, you're going to have more children because you know only half are going to make it. So a core climate solution, actually, in a lot of places, is family planning, empowering women, providing basic health care, and just letting women actually have a real choice in their life. And if they
Hmm.
want to have 12 children, they can have 12 children. But if they do not, and speaking as somebody who had one,
Ah,
if they do not, they don't have to. And my goodness, that's a life changer, in all kinds of ways. And the impact on resource consumption is almost like the icing on the cake in terms of the other benefits it has for a woman's life and for the health of herself and her children. So
mm,
that is definitely something that is a win-win all around. But when it comes to high income countries where we do have relatively low birth rates, um, we are just wasteful. We are
mm,
very, very, very wasteful. We
mm,
waste over half the energy we produce. 30% of all the fossil fuels are used to just transport and process fossil fuels. Our electricity use is wasteful. Our water use is wasteful. Everything is so wasteful. So there is no question that in high income countries, we could support the number of people we have. We could support many more people than we have if we just had different housing zoning rules, if we had different water and power costs, if we
mm,
had different investment in efficiency measures, carrots as well as sticks. It really, I mean, I know people say the government should take care of it. It really is a case where if we use our voices. So let me give you an example with plastic bags. I haven't used plastic bags for years, right? But
yeah.
I go to the grocery store, there's still plastic bags there, depending on the grocery store. But if you get together with a bunch of people and you kick up enough of a stink and you get plastic bags banned, then nobody's using plastic bags.
Hmm.
So it's the same with our water resources and our sewage. If enough people get together and be like, this is a huge problem. Why is this happening? What do we need? You know, you're going to raise the council tax by this much, but it's going directly to this, and you're going to set up a citizen council to make sure the money goes to that. All right, we'll do it. And we'll get support for that. So using our voices is really, really, really essential because there's so much we could do better. We're so conditioned from just more, 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 more. But if we
Yeah.
could just be smarter about it,
Yeah. Mm. Thank you. Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
Catherine, I know we're a minute past time, so do you have to hop or do you have time for one more
No, I
question?
actually am good. I had something before this, but not after. So, Sydney, go ahead.
Sydney, you're up. Oh, where did she
It's my
go?
lucky day. I forgot
Oh,
to
there she
Oh,
is.
there she is.
unmute. I actually had the privilege of hearing you speak at the Museum of Natural History during Climate Week.
Oh,
Um,
yes, yes.
and it was just absolutely, I found it to be absolutely moving. Like I kind of cried my way through it because as someone who wants to and is to an extent a climate communicator myself, it was just amazing to like see you up there. And it was very clear that you're the best in the game. So I think that my kind of main question for you is as someone who cares about the climate, as I assume we all are on this call, but who obviously, I'm sure, as also, once again, we all are on this call, interacts with people who maybe they don't not care about the climate, but that's not their field or not their specialty. What are your top communication strategies that you and others can use when speaking to other people about climate who maybe they're not, anti-climate change, but they just don't have the same background as us? How can we help to motivate them? I feel like, especially among some people, there's this kind of very sad feeling about climate change instead of, hopeful and empowered. What are your best strategies to deal with that?
I am going to put a couple of resources here in the chat because that's perfect. But I'll answer your question then. I'll go ahead and put them there. Okay. So this is actually a lot of what my TED Talk is about. So you saw the data I showed you how people aren't talking about climate change. And when the researchers at Yale asked them why not, the results they got were very similar to what I've gotten myself. First of all, a lot of people feel like they don't know much about it. They're not a scientist and they haven't made the head to heart connection. So they just think it's one of those things that those scientists and tree huggers care about. So my first key, and my TED Talk is all about this, is if you're starting a conversation, start it with something the other person already cares about. And if you don't know what they already care about, then ask them questions until you get on a topic. Now, you might be like, well, they care about beer, and I don't know how climate change affects beer. Well, that's okay. You just go to my Talking Climate newsletter, you type in beer, and up it pops. Climate change is affecting the quality as well as the content of beer. Um, or asthma, or even fertility rates, or obviously sports. So that's part of why I do Talking Climate, is because I want to give people the talking points that, and I talk about this. Oh, I have a book too. It is also the book is also a audiobook if you like listening to audiobooks. And oh, Talking Climate is also a podcast if you like to listen to podcasts. So I have you covered in every medium. Um, like in my book, I talk about how I've started conversations over a shared love of knitting or wine or chocolate, or beach vacations. So always start with what they care about, not what you care about. Because nobody wants to talk about what you care about. They want to talk about what they care about, right? And you can actually have surprisingly amazing conversations with somebody who thought they didn't care if you actually connected it to their passion, whatever their passion is. But then the second reason people don't talk about it is because it is incredibly depressing. And there's a few people, the Debbie Downers of the world, who love talking about depressing stuff because that's the way they process negative emotions. That is not the way I do it. That's not the way most people do it. And so most people don't want to talk about it because it's negative. They're afraid you're going to be talking about starving polar bears, melting ice sheets, and the end of the world. So that's why, in addition to the heart, we have to talk about the hands. So that's why in Talking Climate, every week I start with good news. And people love good news. When I share good news on social media, people are like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. A new ship just crossed the Atlantic using sails instead of a diesel engine. That's incredible. Or, there's a sticker that keeps fruit from going bad for 30 days. And so we reduce all the methane emissions and we address food scarcity and hunger at the same time. That's great news. So if you share these really cool solutions of what other people are doing and what we're doing ourselves, like, I subscribe to this all wind power program and you wouldn't believe how cheap it is. It's amazing, or my favorite way to buy clothes is thrifting. I love thrifting. Now you can thrift online. It's so fun. You can get amazing things like, actually, this is thrifted. A spider top for, would have cost me like what, $95 new, and I got it for like $15. Like just like stuff that gives you joy. And so that's people want to have those conversations and they want to come back to those conversations in the future. So that's really the key is the heart and the hands. What do people already care about and bringing in a positive, constructive solution that they could actually get excited about and be like, wow, that's so cool. And then they're not afraid of the discussion anymore. They're not afraid to have a conversation. So that's a great full circle. Thank you, Sydney. That was a good question.
Well, great questions from everybody. And
Mm.
Catherine, every time we have you here, I learn so much. And, you know, the head, the heart, and the hand is now going to be part of our lexicon. Um, and, you know, and athletes as role models and as megaphones, they also have the voice, and we can have our champions wherever possible in all of our varied programs and the ways we get them out into the world can emphasize that head, heart, hand. Um, and I urge all of you to sign up for Catherine's newsletter, Talking Climate. Um, I thought when Catherine, you were talking about the weird weather, it made me think about your old series, Global Weirding, which I think those episodes, if you Google it, you could find some of Catherine had a video series called Global Weirding for several seasons. I think it was on PBS, and those were awesome. And now, Catherine, I have a favor to ask you, which is if you ever can find a Texas Tech athlete, student athlete, who is interested, we would love to have a Red Raider on the Eco Athletes Champions roster. I know you guys are competing for a football national championship, but any varsity sport y'all have, we're ready.
All right, I will get on that because we have a climate center at the university, and so I can ask all of our members of our climate center if they know any student athletes.
Fantastic. And I want to, so Catherine, thank you so much. We will make all these resources available to all of the champions. This video is going to go to all, we're now up to 240 eco athletes champions
Mm,
worldwide.
that's amazing.
Um, and so thank you for giving us these insights and sharing your can-do spirit. And to the champions and to all our friends who joined us here, thank you for being part of the climate comeback. We will be back in touch soon. And in fact, I want to announce we are going to have our next locker room session is going to be January 28th. Uh, you'll get all the information. It's going to be with folks from the Environmental Defense Fund, EDF, and they're going to talk about how to talk about climate. Um, and so January 28th, email to come. Thank you for all you do. And if we don't speak, have a great holiday.
Thank you. Great to see you all. Bye.
Thank you so much, Catherine.
Thank you.